And good morning, Patriots. It's Chris Cordani filling in for Tony Shaffer this morning. We do have a lot to talk about today, and I will have my guest, Todd Sheets, economist Todd Sheets, who's been here before with us. And we're going to talk about the markets because both sides have always played that, oh, look at the stock market. It's absolutely fantastic. Well, we know the dollar has been going down in value for a very, very long time. So are we in a bubble? Are we not? And let's talk inflation. Let's talk everything else with Todd. We're also going to talk some marketing. I do have with me my co-host for the day, Jenny Kefauver, who's been with us before. Jenny, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
So is your phone number really 867-5309?
Do you know how many times I've heard that in so many years? I am an 80s child after all, so I guess it's befitting.
That should be your business number. If you can get that maybe on your cell, your publicity company, if you have 867-5309, you would be the top publicist in all of America, and everybody would want you because they just say, hey, I can easily remember my my rep's number.
There you go. There you go. It's definitely quick and easy to remember.
That's a business tip from me, and it's probably better to take business tips from me than Julie Feiss or Julie Fels-Massino.
Right? Right?
We're going to get into that in just a few moments, but I do want to lead off with some of the top stories, especially I believe the top story of the day is John Bolton's house was raided, and so was his office last Friday by the FBI.
Well, FAFO, right? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. I remember he didn't really care when Trump's Mar-a-Lago was raided, so fair is fair, right?
Well, the problem I have with I keep calling him Michael Bolton, but it's John Bolton. The problem I have with John Bolton, besides he can't sing, is he was a longtime neocon warmonger. I don't know why Donald Trump brought him in. I'm pretty sure he was pulled in at the last year or so or last roundabout, if you will, of Trump's first term to try to satisfy the neocons who were still never Trumpers. That wasn't going to work in the first place. Secondly, if you're going to be a peacemaker, why even bring that guy into the fray? I'm going to digress from that. The idea is this man allegedly and most likely divulged, he did divulge national secrets or national security secrets in his book, but were they from classified documents? That's the question.
Well, my understanding is that he did so in his book. And see, what I don't understand, I mean, look, I've had a few experiences with clients in the publishing industry, and I thought that you had to have everything cleared by the federal government before you go on and publish a book. So clearly something fell through the cracks. I couldn't tell you what, but I mean, to go ahead and proceed with that was ultimately very irresponsible. And there's a lot of, different factors at play. And I think that there's definitely a media double standard. I mean, obviously the legacy media is saying, oh, poor John Bolton, what a victim. But they had no sympathy of Trump when that whole thing happened. And, like I was telling you beforehand, every time I'd see Bolton at an event, whether it's CPAC or what have you, he always have the small army around him. And so he just always struck me as kind of above the fray, a little what's the word? Untouchable, not too approachable, not too, just very kind of better than everybody else.
Well, again, a lot of these guys kind of have to appear like that. I get it. And you can't really get somewhere in politics without an ego issue. So when I hear, oh, this guy has an ego, this guy, or Trump is, well, the fact is the guy got to where he was because he has nards. He has, to quote a younger fellow in his administration, big balls.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And look, Donald Trump was a celebrity Barack Obama was a celebrity in chief, but he had an ego, and that's what attracted him to the Democrats. So, or attracted the Democrats to him, probably vice versa. Anyway, that's how it worked. The fact is, you do need something of an ego. You do need to be something of an attention hound, if you will, if you want to be the president of the United States. The fact is, the other side of that coin is you still have to be able to do your job and do it for everybody. You're everybody's president. This is why he's cleaning up the streets of Washington. He's making it safe for everybody, including the people that live there. And there were compliments out of this. There are people we played some videos in the last week about people who love the idea that their streets are safe to walk on now after 6 o'clock. In fact, you remember the Boomtown Rats?
Sure.
The Boomtown Rats had a song called Up All Night. And the second verse was, it's an agreeable town, It's needed today. Why even the muggers are off the streets by 8. And that, my friends, is now Washington.
No murders in the last several days. And I just don't understand how the left is angry about this and they're protesting this. Do you really want murder and mayhem? I mean, I thought that a conservative is a liberal who got mugged, so we'll see how that works for them once that's over, right?
Well, I suppose so. The liberals are the problem is they just don't like Trump being right. It's something
No, they
about
don't.
it's about their absolute hatred for Donald Trump. I do want to get into that, and I want to get back into Bolton too with you. But I do want to mention that the Patriots had this really cool weekend. I got to watch some of it on Thursday. The Trixie and Deborah Lynn and everybody and George and people down there and Sean were in Nashville over the weekend. They had a really good time. They did a very long broadcast on Friday, which looked like a lot of fun as well. And look, thanks for having that weekend. I know Tony and I would have loved to have made it. There's some home things here I got to deal with, and Tony was Tony was across the country, but we'd like to try that again with you guys. It was a lot of fun, and it really did look like fun. If anybody missed that, check it out. It's on the archives of the Wake Up Patriots channel. I did like what Roger Stone said. I did put that up just a moment ago, where he said, "Karma is a rhymes with which," to John Bolton after he got raided. Because these guys are on their high horses looking at this. Oh, yeah, Roger Stone and Dr. Corsi, who I do his podcast. Now, we had to run an encore presentation, but tomorrow I'm looking forward to what he thinks of the whole thing. Because he was brought out in handcuffs just like Roger Stone because the Democrats wanted to make an example of somebody. I do believe Trump and Trump's FBI handled it well. It was a peaceful raid. It wasn't like they stormed in with guns and they said, "Give me the stuff or I'll shoot." They didn't pull the Biden Mar-a-Lago garbage, because I still believe that the idea was that when they put some of those plainclothes people in for the raid, the idea was for Trump or somebody to come out there, mostly Trump, and try to deny them, and then finding an excuse to shoot them.
No, absolutely. Well, it just goes to show that when DOJ knocks, even the fortress can't protect you, and equal justice means equal rules. Not one playbook for friends and another one for foes. Fair is fair.
Well, he's already established himself as not a friend. Now, the liberals, the people on the left, are trying to say, "Oh, look, Donald Trump is weaponizing the government." If the Democrats were okay with Donald Trump being being raided at Mar-a-Lago for, they said classified documents, but they were really declassified documents, then why are they not upset, or why are they going after Trump about him trying to recover classified documents from a former national security advisor?
It's always a selective outrage, Chris. It's always the media double standard. I've seen this for decades. This is nothing new, but it's just with Trump, it's taken to a different level. They just hate him so much that, I mean, there's so many who say that if he were to cure cancer, they'd, be for cancer. So it just makes no sense whatsoever. It's just, it's just a ridiculous notion.
Now, a lot of people who might not be regulars of this program are probably saying, "Chris, you're a conspiracy theorist. CNN would never do something like that." Look, our Patriots already know they would. But CNN, they're always fair because they're a news network. Well, let's just hear what happened with Aaron Burnett back when Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago was raided to get the declassified documents versus the very peaceful gathering of documents. That's what it was. It was a gathering of documents. Nobody was storming in. Nobody was taking John Bolton out in handcuffs. And they weren't going to do that if he was there either. Here you go. Let's do this.
Breaking news. We are learning that the FBI executed a search warrant at former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. We also know that it had turned out earlier, right, that the president had taken a lot of documents that were marked as top secret classified to Mar-a-Lago that he shouldn't have. I guess this just cuts the bottom line on what's happened here. Do you believe that the raids on John Bolton's home and his office are political payback? Breaking news. We are learning that the FBI executed a search warrant at former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. We also know that it had turned out earlier, right, that the president had taken a lot of documents that were marked as top secret classified to Mar-a-Lago that he shouldn't have. I guess this just cuts the bottom line on what's happened here. Do you believe that the raids on John Bolton's home and his office are political payback? Breaking news. We are learning.
And there you go. They're trying to frame this as political payback. Again, holding somebody responsible for taking classified documents as a former national security advisor and leaking them in a book, that's not political payback. You might say it could be it's repercussions for trying to pull a fast one on Trump before, but also keep in mind, this guy actually did what he did. This is not like the Joe Biden Department of Justice using using his arms, his enforcement arms as a weapon to take declassified documents that basically he didn't want people to find out about from Mar-a-Lago.
Well, when Americans see two sets of rules, they lose trust in justice. And my understanding from reading through the news stories on this issue is that the Biden administration chose not to go ahead and prosecute. And so to me, the ball was dropped. But, I again go back to the publishing industry and why the book was approved to go forward. I mean, if there were troubling items, that should have been a hard stop. So, I mean, there were lots of failures from the get-go. And to me, it's just a poor reflection on what should have happened versus what actually did happen. And I'm thankful that, Mr. Bolton is being held accountable. So we'll see what happens going forward.
That's another interesting point you bring up. This is not a new investigation. This is the continuation of something from the Biden Department of Justice, I believe, back in 2022. Mm-hmm. And they were going to go after John Bolton. But I guess since John Bolton was an anti-Trumper and somebody who's very important for the deep state, the DOJ decided to push that aside.
Selective justice at work once again. I mean, that's not justice whatsoever.
Right, exactly. Patriots, what do you think about that? Is that, I mean, again, a lot of us really don't care about John Bolton in that respect because, yeah, fine, he did what he did, so he should be punished for doing that. The problem is this is a bigger issue than just the one raid. It's basically, as I said, the Democrats have been weaponizing the government for a long time. I'm not even talking about just the Biden administration. During the Obama administration, you remember the IRS was deliberately under orders from the executive branch going after conservative groups. They were, and you had, again, Merrick Garland. The only thing he did as a DOJ under Biden is to prove to us what kind of a bullet we dodged, not having him as a Supreme Court justice. Although I think Ketanji Brown Jackson kind of, oh my gosh. Well, anyway, that's something we can talk about for a full 16 episodes. But CNN also, they get worse every time out. Abby Phillip was trying to convince a panel. Of course, we're convinced. I don't know who she was trying to convince. I suppose there are some liberal friends on this panel that would agree with her wholeheartedly. She's trying to tell us that, get this, the Biden administration never weaponized the government, and there's no evidence of such. What do you think, Jenny? Let's hear her.
This idea that this was a weaponized, these were all these different prosecutions and all these different jurisdictions were not all directed from one place. There's absolutely no evidence of that. You guys can tell me what evidence you have of that, but I've never seen it, and I've never heard anybody actually voice it.
The Obama and Biden administrations didn't politicize the DOJ. And
okay, who?
Oh, I mean, come on. You could, I mean, they were better at hiding who it was, or not transparent.
I'm just saying, how do we know who? If you are making the claim that this was directed by some kind of big puppeteer at the top of the pyramid, who is that person?
So how did the IRS only go after conservative groups?
But they did it though. And why? You're not answering my question. Who is the person? I know, right?
Who is the person was basically telling you you're inventing a conspiracy theory of one puppeteer controlling everybody else. The fact is, anybody could see quite easily that both administrations, especially the Biden administration, used the government or used government arms, government law enforcement as a weapon against its enemies. The lawfare against Donald Trump, even judge shopping for that. You had independent states were doing the same thing, but all under orders from the Democrats, the National Democrats. You had the Mar-a-Lago raid, which we talked about. That was an obvious one, but there were plenty more. And look, this was an FBI under Joe Biden that tried to convince its agents and Americans that Catholics who used the Latin Mass were domestic terrorists
or moms at school board meetings.
Yeah.
It was just so heavy-handed. And look, let's take the J6 thing for a quick example. I mean, look, I think personally the ones who caused damage and destruction, yeah, they should be held accountable. But so many of them were just there to support fellow patriots. And I think DOJ was super heavy-handed and destroyed so many lives. And so many of them are still feeling the fallout from all of that. And it was just terrible across the board. And there definitely needs to be something done about this lawfare. And I'm thankful that we have Trump. I can't imagine what would happen if we still had Biden in office. My goodness.
I don't think we really ever had Biden in office during the auto pen administration, but that's another story for another day.
Good point there, Chris.
Yes, and the points generally at the top of of the CNN news bunnies' heads. That's another story again for another couple of days. We could do a lot of shows on those, but a lot has been made about this Cracker Barrel logo, the new Cracker Barrel logo, and this whole rebranding of the company. And there are a lot of things I can say about this. We have heard almost everything from everybody. Let me get to this article because so I can show you the old Cracker Barrel logo versus the new one. It's an ugly hexagon with just Cracker Barrel and a more boring font than the old one.
To me, to take away the iconic logo is just really, I mean, what, to satisfy some woke DEI requirement? I mean, clearly there's a lot of backlash, and I really hope that they think twice about this decision. I mean, I kind of understand in some instances why companies may want to rebrand for various reasons, but I mean, DEI over customers, this is going to lose them both money and trust. I mean, personally, I'm not a personal fan of the Cracker Barrel brand. However, that all said, I totally get where the outrage is coming from. And I think that they need to revert back to what works. Obviously, what was the saying? Go woke, go broke. This is not working well for them.
Well, the funny thing is this is being called woke. I understand that point of view because you're taking the traditional white guy with the old barrel and old-fashioned Americana. You're taking all of that out of there. This is a long-standing attack on American history. I get that. I understand that. That's also paired with the long-standing dumbing down of this country in a lot of ways. Look how not only did you knock out the tradition of this logo, but you kind of dumbed it down. Mm-hmm. There's no more picture on it. Now people can understand it. This is not new, by the way. I want to get into this with the CEO, and the CEO actually has the uniform of the typical liberal woman with the fake glasses and everything. I'm not sure if they're fake, but they have to be. She's trying to look smarter. That's what they do. They try to have the Rachel Maddow glasses look so they can pretend to look smarter. That's the uniform. I mean, what's his name? Mark Cuban even wears those. So anyway, it's a long-standing tradition. I remember in the 1990s when Kentucky Fried Chicken took the American or the whatever woke ad agency or the idiot ad agency took out the Americana feel of Kentucky Fried Chicken with the old buildings with the point on the top looked like the hat or something. They used to have the Colonel all the time, and it was always spelled out Kentucky Fried Chicken with Colonel Sanders. They started changing it to something called KFC. And I guess it's easier to spell for some people who just don't get what Kentucky Fried Chicken really means, or maybe idiots who come in the big cities. Kentucky's too far away. I don't know what that is. But
I also remember that.
I guess they changed to KFC so dumbed down lowest common denominator portions of America could learn how to spell it, or could actually spell the name of Kentucky Fried Chicken. But it wasn't there. It wasn't even just that. There was there was about a half a year where the ad agency tried to take the Colonel out in other ways, where these women and these men, I guess in a family, were talking about, ooh, this smells good. It's Kitchen Fresh Chicken. Ooh, we have Kitchen Fresh Chicken. Trying to make a new acronym out of KFC.
I totally remember that. I also remember, I think it was in the 2000s when they resurrected the Colonel in commercials. And I find that a little unsightly. It's like, he's been dead since like the early 80s. So. Oh,
you mean the cartoon Colonel, right?
Yeah, that didn't sit well with me. And I don't think that was a hit. So yeah, that was, I don't think that worked out well for them either.
No, it didn't. And it's not just Cracker Barrel and Kentucky Fried Chicken. This has been a trend going for 40 years. The uglification or the oversimplification of American or traditional American restaurants, fast food chains, or pretty much any other business. I have an example here of some in this picture. You've probably seen this meme going around, so I thought I'd post it of what the old franchises would look like compared to what the new ones look like. Look, McDonald's was distinct at one point. Now it looks like a box. And trust me, drive around America, you see these new rebrands, the rebuilds, it's all a box.
So boring. So boring.
Remember the Pizza Hut iconic roof? That's gone too. That's gone too. Yep.
The uniqueness and sort of the iconic what we knew growing up is no longer the same, and I'm not okay with that.
And Taco Bell is absolutely ugly now too. I suppose again, these are just dumbed down, very simplified versions of their companies. I submit to you that I've taken I've taken advertising courses because that's what I had to do in college. But I work with ad people. I know this, that they still have to always, or at least try to advertise to what they call the lowest common denominator. But there's a point where it goes just way too far.
Wow. That's, so one point about the McDonald's is, did they even have the play places anymore? I mean, that was a great place when my kids were little where I used to take them. But my understanding now is it's liability and so forth. So it's like, wow, the trial lawyers end up ruining everything, don't they? So it's no longer, you don't see the colorful play places, the same places where we were growing up. So how sad and how boring.
Yeah, it is sad and boring. We are a homogenized America. And look at today's pop music. I know I'm sounding like one of those old guys from back in my day saying, turn that infernal racket off. Your music stinks. The fact is, the kids are listening to music from my day now because they're starving. And before my day, because they're starving for something good. Music has become a science where you remember the 353 dominated the 353 chant or whoop, I would say, dominated music for, I guess, about a decade at one point, maybe even longer. With the whoa, whoa, that whole thing.
Absolutely.
It captivated millennials. I suppose it, I can go in the whole science in this. I've done research on this, but it kind of like just raises their endorphin levels or raises their subconscious excitement levels. And they go, oh, look at this. It's great. And I always talk to people in the 90s and the 80s who liked their club music, and the club music was pretty bad. I think 1987 was the time when music started really getting dumbed down.
Yes.
But it has a nice beat. And then they started putting beats under good music at dance clubs. And I was like, what the heck are you people doing to music? But certain chords perk the masses up, if you will. Not everybody, because they send me into a rhythm of disgust. But the lowest common denominator likes the whoa, whoa, the 353. They like the oversimplified music, and they like the same siren singers they're hearing nowadays, the same kind of style of music. It's now homogenized. And by the way, Jenny, dumbed down. Your thoughts?
Well, I definitely agree with you, Chris. I mean, maybe I sound like a get off my lawn generation type, but there's nothing like some good 80s music, 70s music, and some 90s and even early 2000s music. And on that note, I miss how when MTV used to have music videos where they tell a story about behind the song. I miss that. I mean, whatever happened to that? We're definitely growing up in a different era, and I end up watching YouTube so I can kind of relive those days.
I have a theory about that. I've thought about this a lot. And MTV realized that it's a lot. Back in the day, MTV knew it was cheap enough just to play music videos. And of course, I'm sure there were issues when it comes to royalties after that. But it used to be MTV was cutting edge. They would play videos that were submitted to them from companies. They would play videos. The artists would fight to get on. And they've had a diverse array of artists for a long time. But they really ushered in the new wave era. Songs that may not have become hits on radio alone became hits because of the videos. And that's where MTV had influence. After MTV stopped playing videos, or maybe cut it down to the point where they put a very select few on. And I mean, very select. Back in the day, radio stations, certain ones, and MTV would make hits. They would make artists. Nowadays, you only hear or pop radio stations play what's already a hit, what's already approved by the industry. You don't hear a lot of great new voices unless they're allowed through.
That's very, very true. Very corporatized and so forth. And I find myself listening to a lot of 80s on Sirius XM and listening to the old school VJs. That's a lot of fun.
I'm going to say this right now. The playlists are really short on there too. Even First Wave, which would be technically my station,
Mhm.
First Wave has a very short playlist, and they keep playing the same artist too many times. I had a show called Revenge of the 80s Radio, and I tried to even serve as an alternative to that, where I would play the Little Girls. I would play Killing Joke, but not just the 80s. I play other stuff from them. I play deep cuts from The Clash. I play deep cuts from I play Edward Tudor Pole and 10 Pole Tudor on a regular basis, and new music from those artists. This First Wave kind of has a slim playlist too, and I believe Sirius fixed that with the Little Steven's Underground Garage, because it kind of mixes a lot of things like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s through today. So it's kind of good. A lot of underground stuff, but music is dumbed down today. And again, advertising. Let's go to that. So, ever notice that that advertisers have shortened words? They're shortening words to make them more understandable to the lowest common denominator, thereby part of the dumbing down of American culture. And George, you're right. The systematic elimination of American culture or Americana. Deodorant is now called Dio in every commercial. I blame that one woman, the woman who does the Lume, that stupid commercial where she's on the phone going, "I'm telling you," and she starts saying butt crack and armpit, and she does a close up of her rear end and under boob, the way she pronounces that. I mean, it's embarrassingly bad, and what should have been a laughing stock became a trend. Every other deodorant company was doing the same thing after that, and they kept calling it Dio. And it's just stop it. Our generation's that dumb? Are the younger generations that dumb, or are we trying to make them dumber?
I don't know. I think that you have something there about the dumbing down of different terms and things like that. I think you have something there.
Yeah. Bring back full words. That's what I say. I'm going to say this. I'm going to talk to Ed. Maybe we should change the name of this podcast from Wake Up Patriots to Wake Up Patriots and Get Off My Lawn.
I don't know, though. Wouldn't that make us boomers in that sense? We're not quite boomers yet.
They call us boomers. They can't do anything to us Generation Xers because we don't care about their names because we're the ones that make fun of everybody. And the boomers kind of raised us, and they raised us kind of right in a lot of ways. So you can't fault boomers for a lot of things. You can't fault boomers for one thing. Bring it in Bill Clinton.
Yeah, this is the truth. I tell you, I was at a concert last week, and it was a James Taylor concert, and I tell you, it was full of boomers. It was packed.
Oh, what do you expect? James Taylor. I mean, what were you doing at a James Taylor concert? You got to hit a Men Without Hats concert.
I know, but a friend of mine had a free ticket, and I do enjoy some of his music. So,
all right, that's my favorite kind. People come to me and say what my favorite kind of concerts are, or my favorite kind of ice cream is. Right? I always tell them the free kind.
There you go. Yeah, nonetheless, it was a good time. But man, the age demographic definitely skewed older. I'd say 50s and up for sure, and it was packed. It was packed full on a Thursday night.
Well, it's funny. That's what we do. We technically, the older generations have the money now. We can buy new music from these artists. We can buy their tickets. We can go follow them if we wanted to. I've never been one to follow any band, but I do when Men Without Hats comes around. I like to see them. Josie Cotton, somebody like that. I want to see Annabella Lowen when she comes here, but she doesn't get to come to New York as much. The closest she's been is maybe Virginia, but maybe she'll be in Atlantic City soon. So we'll see about that. Got to see Wang Chung several times. Nice. Wang Chung, accomplished jazz musician. So when you see them play their hits, they play very long improv right in the middle.
Wow.
It's absolutely fantastic. Once I saw a Men Without Hats concert with my friend Adriana from Kid Creole and the Coconuts. Yes, I'm name dropping for a little bit. And we saw him. Ivan wore a hat.
I love that. I didn't know you were fangirling. That's so cool.
I'm fanboying.
Fanboying.
Wait, am I fan transing? Is that what you're saying? Are you telling me I'm fan transing?
Right. I did not mean to just gender you there, Chris.
And by the way, isn't the name Cracker Barrel racist to begin with?
Oh goodness!
I mean, come on. If they want to go all the way, lady, they changed the name of the Indians to the Guardians. And I'm going to say this right now: the Cleveland Indians became the Cleveland Indians. Arguably because they had arguably the first Native American to play Major League Baseball. on their team, or the team they evolved into. The Cleveland Spiders from 98 and 99 had Chief Suck Alexis. He was actually a very good ball player, a star ball player. He had some issues that off the field that kept him from becoming the star he might have been. But arguably, the name Indians was in honor of having Chief Suck Alexis on the team in the past. That's what they'll tell you. But again, they had to change it to a stupid name like the Guardians.
Of course
So
they did.
Let's hope nobody gets in a Cracker Barrel and changes that name just because they think it's racist. They already changed the Redskins. I say bring them back. Todd Sheets is with us. Economist. See, now you're in the middle of this discussion. I want to get to the market bubble, but I want to ask your opinion of this dumbing down of American culture and American advertising. The Cracker Barrel thing is, again, I don't call it as woke as many people might call it. I would call it basically a continued dumbing down of American culture and American businesses and American life.
Well, this is not my area of expertise, but I mean, I would guess there's a lot of people that have felt like this has been going on for 50, 60 years, maybe since the beginning of television and that type of thing. So I probably fall into the category where I've gotten so used to it, I'm not even that offended by it anymore.
Well, I wouldn't say offended. I'm not alarmed or offended. I'm just saying this has to be reversed somehow, and I don't think it's going to happen. And again, I'm not talking about the actual advertisement. Companies always go through a rebrand. They always go through something, but that's when they're failing. This company wasn't failing. This company was actually doing very well. But this, I guess, this CEO woman, and we have to try to find her here. There we go. Why do we always forget her name? It's because it's forgettable, I would say. Her name is Julie Faust-Messino. She actually has a long history with companies. She's a business person. I get that. But this is a complete dumbing down. You took a very interesting, sophisticated Americana-based logo, and you turned it into what amounts to a low-rent gas station. I mean, even the Motel 6 has a nicer logo than this now. It's a bland hexagon with bland font.
Yeah, well, it's not very appealing, is it? It looks like something from the 1950s or the 1940s, I would say, before things became more sophisticated. But you know what all this talk reminds me of is what's happening with Gavin Newsom.
Yes.
And trying to rebrand and become more Trump-like, and how inauthentic that is. And I think that happens with companies, obviously, also. They try and stay relevant. They do something new and try and be maybe edgy or just change or whatever. And many times it's successful, but also many times it just falls flat. And there's a lot of examples of that from over the years. So
exactly. And let's hear from her first, because I didn't get to play this last week. She was on blabbering on about all this on Good Morning America when we were off the air. So let's hear from her. And I want to just point a couple of things out. She was on Good Morning America, George Stephanopoulos' outfit.
Honestly, the feedback's been overwhelmingly positive that people like what we're doing. I'll give you another soundbite. I actually happened to be in Orlando last week with all of our managers. We bring them together and once every other year. And the number one question that I got asked, Michael, was, how can I get a remodel? When can I get a remodel? How do I get on the list?
Oh, really?
So because the feedback and the buzz is so good, not only from our customers, but from our team members. They want to work in a wonderful restaurant. So
I was kind of hoping that Michael Strahan would put a nice block on her. But she's saying, all right, I get it. Some managers who are probably just as kind of silly as they are don't like the crowded feel of Cracker Barrel, but that's why people are there. I'll drive by a Cracker Barrel. I don't go to Cracker Barrel that often. I'm not a big fan of the food. That's the only reason. But I can't argue with it. It's virtually always crowded. The parking lot's always full.
Yeah, no, look, I've got one of my children. He lives out in San Francisco and works in venture capital. He and his wife, they like to go out for very nice dinners in San Francisco. They travel all over the place. But when he comes back to Florida, he wants to go to Cracker Barrel and have breakfast at least one day when he's back and that kind of thing. So, yeah, there's a lot of appeal to it. Companies try and, like we said, stay edgy, move on, attract a new audience and that kind of thing. And it can be a very dangerous thing. If you've got, if what you have is working, trying to edge it up or reach out to a new audience or change things too much, it can be a very dangerous thing. I'm kind of curious how she got a spot on Good Morning America to discuss all of this. I mean, that makes me wonder if they're paying for a place that's supposed to seem like news, but is actually like a paid, placement or something like that. That's pretty interesting to me.
Actually, Jenny, I want to get your thoughts on that too. That's funny because I can't accuse them of that right now, but hey, I'm sure Cracker Barrel is a sponsor of ABC somewhere along the line, and this had to be a positive interview. You don't see any challenging here from Strahan or anybody from the if you saw the whole interview.
No, of course there's no pushback because this is legacy media that you're talking about. They're going to go along with, something that they think would fit their narrative. So it doesn't surprise me whatsoever that no one would push back.
I do want to say that Todd Sheets is the author of the very cool book, 2008, What Really Happened. And believe me, we've talked about that several times. We should get to you and talk to you, maybe go back in a little bit history with that as well, Todd, and we'll put the book up in just a little bit. But we do want to talk about this article you have up. And that's from your Substack. The market, I'm tired. I've been tired for about, 30 years of people saying, oh, the economy's going so well because the Dow Jones is always up. Look at the records they're putting up. The Dow Jones is 30 select stocks. The powers that be can take off the weak ones and put in the stronger ones just to skew the numbers. And I'll say, look, if you want to go for real life, look at the S&P 500 or Russell 2000. But even today, when those are up, we have a weakened dollar. We have a lot of other issues when it comes to the economy. And I don't care what side you're on, our side or somebody else's side. You can't just look at the market anymore. And now the question is, and you're proposing this really interesting question, are we in or getting close to a bubble?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that. And I think the first comments that you had there are very important before we move directly into the bubble issue, because you're right. A lot of what has happened over the last 25 years, and actually extending back a little further than that, but especially over the last 25 years, is we've gotten into this environment where the Federal Reserve has consistently run ultra low interest rate policies to try and juice up the underlying economy and create, more economic vibrance, more job creation, and those kinds of things. And basically, it has failed over and over again to achieve that objective. But what has happened is it has helped push up the value of assets like the stock market, like housing prices, like bonds for a period of time. And, these asset inflations, as I've called them at places, they don't really reflect what's happened in the underlying economy to the extent that they should have, which starts to create risks and it starts to create problems. So in the 2000s, it was part of creating the housing bubble and then the collapse. They went back to this same model only on steroids in the 2010s, which only helped subsidize the huge run up in government debt that happened under the Obama administration, their first 4 years when they engaged in huge deficit spending. But now it's also left us with stock markets, that are probably higher than they would be otherwise, that are fairly stretched from a valuation perspective relative to historical norms. And we're back with very high housing prices, which may or may not cause another collapse like last time, but it's definitely created a big affordability problem out there. So, your comment that what is happening with the Dow or even the S&P 500 and the broader indexes doesn't necessarily represent what's happening in the real economy, that's very much spot on. And it all comes back to these misguided Federal Reserve policies that we've been running.
Jenny, I want to get your thoughts on this too. It's easy to look at the numbers and say, wow, the economy is doing great. But underlying all that, and this is where some of these young people have really turned to socialism. You're a young couple. You're getting married at 25 to 29 years old, and it's still older than maybe a lot of generations in the past. Maybe you're getting married at 30, 31, and you're finding the price of a starter home is not what you thought it was in certain areas of the country. Oh, of course, you can go to some places where it's more affordable, but where are the jobs? It's almost like we're not just in a stock market bubble. We're in a serious, and since you brought this up, we're in a serious lack of affordability crisis that has turned a lot of people in younger generations towards something that they really don't understand, hoping that it'll save their rear ends. And who's going to tell them? Who's going to tell them otherwise? This Zoran Mamdani character who's telling you, well, we're just going to tax the richer people to make everybody else much better. We're going to make government-run stores, and these kids are thinking, well, I can't afford rent anymore. Even though this very rich guy is getting money from billionaires and railing against billionaires and still living in a rent-controlled apartment, maybe he'll help me out.
Well, I think it's all about expectations. I mean, back in the 70s and 80s, if you will, remember when inflation was sky high, interest rates for mortgages were like in the double digits and so forth. I mean, our generation has not really seen that. So I think that a lot of the younger folk automatically think they're going to live like their parents when it's kind of like it takes a very long time for them to get to that point. I mean, I think it's about managing expectations. Maybe you start off living with some roommates and, you know, you put aside savings. I don't think there's enough of an emphasis on savings and financial responsibility. That's something I've tried to drill into my own two kids as they pursue young adulthood and careers and so forth. And I think that we just have to keep expectations at scale. I mean, no, you're not going to live quite like your parents do right away, but you work yourself up to that. You know, you live modestly so that maybe later you can scale up as you can afford to, and there you go. But I think affordability and so forth is just at scale as to what a young person is earning. You know, that all said, I do think the job market is not great. I keep hearing that many young graduates, including my own son, are having trouble finding an even entry-level position. So it's, my personal opinion, being a non-economist, is that we're still cleaning up the hangover from the Joe Biden administration's economic policies. Tariffs and so forth has spooked investors, and the housing market has gone a little softer. There's a lot of inventory around here. Folks have lost their jobs. So I'd really like to hear Mr. Sheets' view on all this.
Yeah, look, I think you've hit on a couple of very important points. And I think one of them, you know, comes back to the educational system, where I think a lot of kids, you know, have been told for a long time, you know, go to college, get a degree, and then they go to college, which cost significantly more than it did 40 or 50 years ago. You know, when I went to school, it was a no-brainer. The cost of the education was so low relative to what it did for you and your career, almost whatever career you wanted to go into, that it was a slam dunk kind of thing. And then over the decades, what ended up happening, you know, is the cost of education kept escalating significantly faster than inflation. And kids also started to go to school and get taught a lot of dysfunctional things. And so, for example, you know, we can just pick a couple of things. You know, they haven't been taught about how socialism has failed everywhere it has been tried, in almost every format that it has been tried in.
But wait, so they'll say you never did it right.
Right?
They never did it right.
What's that?
They'll always tell you, no, but it wasn't done right over there. We can do it right this time.
Yeah, but you know, the problem is, I think that most of the educators, the academics, that's where they want to push the country. So they're not going to say, you know, they're going to say what you said. You know, it's like, yeah, if they had only done it differently this way, but somebody has to say it failed in the industrial Soviet Union. It failed in the agricultural Chinese economy. It failed in the small economies like Cuba or the other places in Central America. Socialism has failed in Europe, which has hardly grown for the last 15 or 20 years, you know, compared to us. And so you go through all those things and they'll say, well, I believe in democratic socialism, like what happens in Norway or Scandinavia. And to them, you have to say, I looked this up one time. You know, if you take, it was 3 of the Scandinavian countries that I looked at. It was probably Norway, Sweden, and one other one. And in 1800, you know, they had something like 5 million people, and America had about 5 million people. And today they have like 12 or 13 million people, and we have 330 or 40 million. And so, you know, what they don't teach you is in certain isolated situations, if you have a very small country that owns enormous natural resources, like let's say Norway does, and you don't allow for much immigration or growth, and you just want to take those resources and spread those up and allow them to benefit the people who are already there, and you stay small and you're not going to let other people in, yeah, that can work. and people are happy living that kind of lifestyle. But if you want a country that grows and has the ability to allow significant levels of immigration for people who are trapped in dysfunctional systems around the world, or if you want to create opportunities for people, to have significantly, better lives than their parents or their grandparents did, and upward mobility like we had for most of this country's history, not the last 20 years or so, you have to have a more dynamic, capitalistic kind of system. It's the only thing that can provide all of those things. And then the last thing is, as you get a larger country with more people, if you believe in social welfare programs, I'm not a big fan of them in general, but let's say you're on the other side and you do. If you want those social welfare programs to be viable and sustainable over periods of time, you have to have economic growth and a dynamic system, or those systems, those social welfare systems, will also become bankrupt, and they will fail the people who are completely dependent on them. So I think a lot of this gets back to the educational system moving in a direction where it became much more expensive. And as it became much more expensive, the education itself became more dysfunctional. It started teaching all of the negatives about America instead of the positives. It started telling kids, major in whatever you want to. Take on $200,000 of debt and get an art history degree. Look, I love art and I love history. But if you need to come out and pay off the cost of your debt and you're going to be responsible for it, art history is not going to do that for you. And so all these things happening at the same time the Biden inflation happened, which is when housing prices went up so much. And now we've got kids with degrees and debt and the inability to buy a home, and housing prices, which are very expensive, along with a lot of other things. So, yeah, I agree very much with what Jenny was saying.
And I agree with both of you as well. I want to get back to your article, too, because you brought this up as well. A strong economy. The market numbers look nice, and the news media is always touting it. And of course, whatever side you're on, and whoever's president, and and people on our side fall for this too, Patriots. So let's not just say the other side does it. Oh, look at the Dow; it's all great. We did that in the beginning. Your article here in your Substack, Todd, and I want to get people. I want you to give people the address and the title of your Substack as well. But the idea is the market strength, as far as the numbers and what it looks like, is great for short sellers. It's great for people who are day traders, and people look at the economy as a way to generate more money for their own pockets. But for long-term strength, you want to look at companies, how they're doing. You want to look at the infrastructure, and you want to see how the American economic infrastructure works. And that includes government spending. That includes the national debt. And that, of course, includes the strength of the companies within.
Yes, very much so. And so, let's take the one of the issues that you brought up there, and we'll come back around to the bubble as well whenever you guys are ready. But maybe you're trying to get me there, but I keep dodging it, which I'm not.
Oh man! Hey, what is this, CNN?
Yeah, it's a good thing my 60 seconds aren't over, or
no, we got plenty of time.
To the topic, but I think my perspective on the economy as a whole is that. One, we have some very big, dangerous issues to deal with. These are the things that were inherited by the Trump administration, which are these very high and chronic budget deficits and these very high levels of debt that we're dealing with right now. Those are dangerous issues for us all to be aware of. At the same time, I think many of the things the Trump administration is doing are setting us up for a much more vibrant and healthy and hopefully growth-oriented economy that can help us grow our way out of these problems, which is the best way to get out of them. That's the least painful way to get out. And I think we are in a situation here where we're only a few months into the new administration. We have been going through enormous levels of change relative to where we've been. I think overall the tariffs are going to be a good thing. But it's taking time before they're getting solidified. And while that uncertainty is out there, that does have an effect on companies and hiring and that type of thing. So, what I'm hearing from the companies is, they're not really firing, but they're not really hiring. And I think that pretty much is reflected in the numbers also. But it's going to take time. The big, beautiful bill just got passed. The impact of that to trickle into the economy, it does these things. The news cycle makes it think like, okay, it was passed last month. Why isn't the job market taking off and all this kind of thing? It's going to take another 12 to 18 months before we likely start to feel the impact of these different things. And we are going to be in a little bit of a transitional period for a while here. So do you guys want to go on to the bubble, or you want to spend any more time talking on that?
Let's do this, because we're going to start talking about transing again. And, Jenny already called me a trans something or other today. So no, let's get into this, because now the question is, you raised the question, are we in a bubble right now? And believe me, I thought we were in a bubble before this, during Biden inflationary periods. The Fed, though, tried to fight against it, or they said they would. I don't think the Fed, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, I don't see Jerome Powell or the Federal Reserve trying to fight inflation as heavily as they claimed they were, I would say, a year ago now.
Oh, I completely agree with that. I think last year they went through 3 rate cuts last year and took the federal funds rate down by a full percentage point. That was a huge mistake. Inflation had finally dropped back down from up in the 7% range, below 3%, but their target is 2%. I would almost be for a 0 inflationary target, but let's just stay with 2% for the time being. That's their target. And to drop rates by 100 basis points, or 1 full percentage point, when you're still at 2.7% and you're a long way from your target, as I wrote in a couple of these recent pieces, that's like declaring victory in the middle of the third quarter when you're still behind on the scoreboard. It's like, you've got to let that inflation come all the way back down. They should have sat tight last year. And if they had, maybe come down a teeny bit, but not nearly as much. And if they had, then there might be room for some rate cuts now. But, what's happened is we've kind of stayed in this 2.7% range. It has stopped dropping. And I actually think that, now they do need to be more vigilant on the inflation side, and they need to be very concerned about decreasing rates too much and too quickly right now, both because the inflation genie could get back out of the bottle again. We're in a very different environment than we were in the 2010s. And also, which will finally bring us back to where you've been trying to get me, because what the history shows is that the 2 major stock market bubbles that we have had back in the 1920s and in the 1990s with the dot-com or the technology stocks, in both cases, there were a series of common factors, which is what I'm going through in this series of pieces I'm writing about bubbles. And you pointed to the first one. And so what we had in each of those cases was, first, we had a healthy bull market kind of environment where stocks are up in, let's say, the mid-teens range year after year for 5 years. So that doesn't push us into a bubble, but it creates this bull market environment, which is kind of an optimism. Like, well, yeah, they've been going up. They're going to keep going up. This is the place to make money. The second thing that happened in both cases is we get a new era mentality develops. Like, we're not only in a strong stock market, we're also in a whole new world of investing, which in the 1920s, it was built around technological change, which at that time was the mass production of automobiles and creating an automobile culture. Radio was new. There were these new technologies that were changing American life. In the 90s, it was built around the internet and how transformative the internet was going to be. So we had those 2 things. The third thing that happened in both of those cases was the Federal Reserve made an ill-timed interest rate cut as these things, these psychologies were building. And so in both cases, you go back and look in like the 2 years before the Fed's rate cut, stocks were maybe up by maybe 15% a year, 12, 13% a year, nothing spectacular. In the 20s, over the next 18 to 24 months after that rate cut, stocks went up by 100%. in the 1990s, after that rate cut, stocks went up by over 200% in about less than a 2-year period of time. So that is another reason why we've got to be very vigilant in watching the Fed. The last thing I would say is after that happens, valuations tend to take off into a realm that is way beyond what the norms have been before that. And those two pieces haven't happened yet. So, what I'm getting to in these series of pieces is, I don't think we're quite in a bubble phase in the stock market yet. We have very high valuations, but not bubble-like valuations. But it is a time for us to be very cautious about what's happened, because typically what occurs is, like when you have these Fed rate cuts and then stock prices start to escalate so dramatically, investors tend to see that as a confirmation that like the new era mentality is right, and they need to jump in with both feet and put everything they have or maybe borrow against their portfolio, when in reality, instead of seeing it as a green light, they should see it as a flashing yellow light of caution that, hey, things may be getting out of hand now. This is not the time to borrow against my portfolio and take on margin debt. It's not the time to deviate from my long-term investing plan and put everything in the tech sector or everything in the Magnificent Seven or something like that. It's a time to stick with your old plans and be cautious about the risk of a bubble developing. And that's kind of where I think we're at right now is we're at risk of a bubble, but we're not really in a bubble yet.
We have a few minutes left. I did want to go to the Patriots, and Jilly One raises the question of stagflation. If we drop rates, if the Fed decides to drop rates, do you think that would cause some stagflation, or would it be the right direction?
Yeah, I actually think we're not in stagflation yet. And it's very important to remember the primary cause of sustained inflation is the Federal Reserve and Federal Reserve policies that are too easy for too long, which creates too much money growth in the money supply relative to the growth in the underlying economy. But so I do think that there is a risk if the Fed cuts rates that we get back into an inflationary environment. I'm not necessarily expecting the stagflation. I'd be more concerned that helps really juice up the underlying economy, which already has a lot of stimulus coming. I think these tariffs are going to be stimulative, and I think the big, beautiful bill is going to be stimulative. The fact that the government is running these big deficits is a stimulative thing. And so there could be so much pouring in that it could lead to one of these, these euphoric kind of moments that we were just talking about where bubble-like conditions develop.
All right, so we do have to close out pretty soon. Jenny, any thoughts?
Well, price is the market tag today. Value is the real worth of the business long term. And with respect to the .com bust, I mean, hype outpaces reality. Crash usually follows.
That does make sense. It really does. Although all this still is preventable, and not creating. And let's just put it this way: what's ineffective is using taxpayer money to buy a Super Bowl commercial, where the president, half cocked or half awake, says, "There's not inflation; it's greedflation. It's shrinkflation." You remember that? That was pretty hilarious watching Joe Biden try to pull that one off. But anyway, the idea is to be vigilant, as you said, Todd, and keep an eye on things. Make sure your politicians are vigilant. And I would like to see the Fed maybe take a little more action to fight inflation from here forward. So any final thoughts, Todd?
Look, I would agree with that. I think, I'm generally supportive of the Trump administration and what they're doing to try and reinvigorate growth. This area with putting pressure on the Fed to cut interest rates, I think is very dangerous on both the inflationary front and on the risk of taking a stock market, a bull market, and turning it into a bubble. I think those are two things for us all to be very cautious about.
Todd Sheets, who is the author of this great book, there it goes again, 2008, What Really Happened. Check it out. You can get that on Amazon or anywhere where you pick up your books. Check out your Substack. What's the address of your Substack?
Yeah, if they just go to substack.com and search on Wealth and Progress and my name, Todd Sheets, they'll find it there. And it's free. It's going to be free for a long time. To me, the most important thing is kind of getting these messages out to the people and that kind of thing.
And Jenny, any cool things happening on your end here?
Just looking forward to tackling the week. Summer's over, really? I mean,
not yet. The summer's not over until September 21st. What is this with people saying summer's over?
Hey, they're playing football games again, so it's got to be close to being over, right?
Yeah, being a Met fan. Usually I'm a Colts fan, so by the time the end of September rolls around, hockey season for me.
ah,
Good for you.
All right. And again, we could talk about dumbing down baseball and football rules. We can just do a whole series on that one. But again, I'll digress. Now, big baseball, major leagues had better get rid of that stupid ghost runner in extra innings because this is not Little League. Stupid COVID rules. Thank you for being with us on Wake Up Patriots. Tony is back tomorrow. Karen is back tomorrow. We have some very cool guests lined up for the week. So thank you for being with us here on Wake Up Patriots.
thank you.